So, part two. So if we dig down into this question a little bit more, it does talk about bands D, E and F. This is for the old syllabus, but we can still use it. So if you look at band D, it says here candidates must describe some ways in which one or more diseases can be both prevented and treated. Okay, so whatever disease you look at, obviously you need to talk about prevention and cure. So if you look at the higher mark band, so here we would be looking at a level 6. It said it should be exemplified, give examples, i.e. case studies in detail of prevention and treatment options, and the geographical factors. So like I said before, that actual balance between prevention and cure might be different, probably would be different for different geographical locations, and maybe even communities within the same geographical location. So there, some very important factors might be your socio-economic economic status. You might also want to consider the morbidity levels within any economic group. So if you've got very, very high morbidity levels in a low socioeconomic group, polite way of saying poor people, if you've got very high death rates for that disease, then you might be looking at a slightly different balance. There, your emphasis might be on treatment and then prevention, whereas at higher socioeconomic groups, you might want to have a bigger focus on prevention. Just some feeling that you're given an idea that there's a variation across both geographically and across those communities. As you know, geography, the other thing I'll say, dealing with something spatially and socially, there's also a time dimension. So a lot of you did look at COVID-19, really good example to look at here. So as we project into the future and more vaccines become available and the rollout of the vaccine affects a larger population, then in the future the exact balance between prevention and cure would be different. So if you look here for the top mark band, what it's saying here is for band F. You would expect both of those elements. So you should provide greater exemplification in detail of prevention and treatment options and their geographical factors that inform those choices. So the other thing that we want to look at, we are dealing with a new syllabus here. You can signpost quite a few things in your conclusions by talking about different perspectives. So in your answer, if you say different perspectives, there would be a different perspective for this community. There will be a different perspective in 10 years' time with COVID. You're very clearly signposting that to the examiner. There's also going to be limitations in the arguments that you present. Rather than seeing this as a bad thing, what you're saying is you've only had time to present a limited amount of evidence. Therefore, any conclusions that you make will be based on that limited body of evidence. Therefore, there will be limitations in any conclusion that you draw. In particular, you would have been able to look at a limited number of perspectives, maybe in a limited period of time. And therefore, any conclusions that you make about this would have its limitations. You need to recognise and flag up the limitations to the conclusions that you are drawing. As always, what I would suggest you do very, very strongly is you look at the mark bands, and you will see for the top mark band it does talk about different perspectives, it does talk about critical understanding, and it does talk about the limitations of the argument that you are presenting. In lessons I have suggested it's a life hack type of way of getting access to higher grades. It's not really, but what you can do is you can signpost more clearly to the examiner those things in the mark bands by using exactly the same language that's in the mark bands. So they're different perspectives, multiple perspectives, limitations. Have a look at that language that they are using in the mark bands. Okay, so in addition to this, if you're watching this, listening to this in 2021, and you've already answered this question, I will be giving you in class individual feedback and focus feedback on your essay, but I just thought it'd be useful to have this general feedback on how to address this essay.